Greetings all, D&Disability here. I think it's time I do that video. The video where I talk about being a blind D&D player and what it's like to be a player at the table. Coming up in the next couple of weeks, you will see one about being a blind game master, and hopefully you will also see one about all of the little intricacies, potential of playing a blind character as well. So, first things first, I want to state something here. Just because I am blind, legally blind, and speaking as a blind person, I do not speak for all blind players, obviously. Many players with disabilities, or as I like to call us, disabled players, it's just shorter, we have different needs, different issues, and that blindness is a spectrum. It's not a light switch. Keep in mind that my issues may not be the same issues as many others. While I choose to walk with or without a cane, some don't have that luxury. Some use dog, some don't need an assistant at all. Right? So listen to what your players have to say and listen to what particularly their needs are. If you take nothing else away from this video, it's listen to your players and communicate. Now, let's get into part one, struggles. I personally tend to struggle with rolling dice sometimes, as in reading the dice once they've been rolled, right? Dice rollers can help with this, but not always. And sometimes I find that they're not any easier to use than using physical dice. I struggle to read rules, as in rule books, charts, character sheets, when a DM just throws a book at me and says, here's the rule set, read it, use it. Thanks. That's not great. What about looking at terrain? Oh yeah, we can totally see your mini right there. It's awesome. No, I typically can't. Making maps. Right? The DM looks at you and says, hey, make a map. You're expected to make a map. Other players look at you and go, why aren't you mapping? Well, I have issues with making maps, predominantly with understanding a detailed layout. Most of my maps turn into almost thought maps. What about reading facial expressions? Or deciding when you can or can't talk? Due to my visual disability, I often cannot read facial expressions. I cannot see them clearly enough to determine, when somebody's about to speak or when they're not, or what the look on their face is. And what about taking notes? Taking notes is a bit of a double-edged sword, right? Those of us that use programs like JAWS, Kurzweil, or any of the number of text readers out there, great, right? They can read text back to us immediately, and even as we type. But we can't usually do that and play at the same time, or at least I can't. Now, two final problems that are, I guess, unique to me, or unique to this setup. One is looking good on camera. Typically, I don't use scripts, or choose not to use scripts, because all you would then see is my great big forehead as I lean in close and try and read. And secondly, right, doing things quick or navigating quickly on the computer. If I'm asked to look at something on my character sheet and then switch over to a dice roller and then switch back to my character sheet like I often do when I live stream on Tuesdays, that is difficult to do quickly. And there is no small amount of pressure to do so and to do so efficiently. How can you help? What can you do to help? Well, first things first, don't assume that you can help. Sometimes players with disabilities don't know what you could do to help. Sometimes you can't do anything. Don't automatically read dice or pick up a book and read it to them if they, if they're struggling, because that robs us, that robs players with disabilities of agency. You're robbing us of that ability to cope. Maybe hand them the book if it's open to the correct page or open to the correct section, but don't do any more than that. Consider a pre-game discussion or well, and or a post-game discussion or discussions about how the game is going and how the game continues to go. Allow alternate character sheet formats. Allow use of alternate dice other than maybe the standard dice at the table or your favorite dice roller. Because what works for you and your table might not work for that player with disabilities. Speaking as a blind player, if a DM tells me that we're only using digital dice or a digital dice roller such as Roll20, I walk. I don't like it. I have my large print dice. I prefer them. So be open to alternate methods of play. Above all, just be patient. Be considerate. Listen first. Ask first. What can I do? As a player with disabilities, as a blind gamer, right? For me, it comes down to pre-game prep work. Finding tools that help me cope. Larger dice, taking large print notes, organizing my character sheet in a way that I can read, which usually includes increased font size or a magnifier of some sort. Consider also bringing in other players, having them help you make maps, or consider looking at their notes if that's something you struggle with. It's okay. Don't feel pressured into playing or being a certain way simply because that's what your table is like. Life is hard and adapting. Players with disabilities need to work together, need to let someone sometimes. We need to consider letting someone tell us maybe what that die is, if that's a 12 or if that's a 13 or, is that a 6 or a 9? Even sighted players struggle with that one. Just make sure you have your table maybe understand something like a nonverbal cue. If you point at the die, that means you can't read it and that somebody else can read it for you. Or, work out something with your table to make the game more accessible for you. Maybe see if you can find a large print copy. Even consider maybe letting the DM make all of your rolls, which, to be fair, will speed things up. However, for me, it robs me of the fun. I like making the rolls myself. It's one of the reasons why I don't like having a computer do it. But ultimately, do what's comfortable for you. Talk it out, right? Above all, communicate with other players. Let them know where you stand, where things are, and how things can move forward. Be patient with them. Because often, as a player with disabilities, the players on the other side are trying to understand or maybe don't understand. And so just as much as those players, not the ones I was talking about in the beginning of the video, not the ones I was talking to in the beginning of the video, but the ones I'm talking to now, I guess, my perspective has shifted, and now I'm talking to the players with disabilities, right? But us, as disabled players, we need to be patient, we need to understand that they need to be let in. And I think, above all, reaching a mutual understanding at the table is kind of what's critical. Okay, those were some of my thoughts and feelings on being a player with disabilities. Next week comes some of my tips and tricks and a brief overview discussion of what it's like being a DM with disabilities. And in the future, if it is of interest, I'm happy to delve into these topics more and kind of break them down. How do I handle my character sheet? How do I handle my DM prep work? Right? But that comes down to what you want to see. So let me know in the comments down below.